Happy today. I am William Brown from IamWilliamBrown.com. This is Disconnect to Connect One Word Conversations. One Word Conversations is a self-discovery, relationship-building conversation designed to invite you to look at your language to see how you are communicating. Many times we come up with lovely words, right? We come up with all the lovely words that we can think of and still find ourselves in a place of disconnection because words don't just come with definitions. They come with stories. They come with expectations. They come with emotions, right? So if we're willing to have a one-word conversation, then we can learn a little bit more about ourselves, the person that we're speaking to, and we can build on to that relationship. One More Conversation is brought to you by IamWilliamBrown.com, a place to help you be yourself and live your life. One way that I spotlight what's available at the I Am William Brown store is our U cards that are a part of our Beyond the Shell series, book series, the Beyond the Shell, Finding You Beyond What Protects You, and The Journey to Stay You. So I pick the U cards to set the intention for the conversation. And so the cards that I picked for the show are I am curious, you are unique, and there is no one youer than you. All right, this is the moment where I invite you to like, share, ask questions, subscribe, do all those things to let me know that you are also a part of the conversation. So the word today is type. And so there's a number of things that have gone through my mind with this word. So I'm very intrigued and interested in seeing how this conversation unfolds. So as I do, I invite a guest in so we can have a conversation. Hello.
Hello.
You know, I was going to say good morning again, but I realized that because you're in the UK, it's like, okay, it's not morning for her. So, right, so stop saying good morning, right? So, but this is the moment where I invite my guests to introduce themselves, however it feels comfortable to them.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And my name is Heather. Heather Jean is my sort of social media name. It's my middle name. It's just not, we don't often use our middle names, most of us. And I'm so happy to be here. And I love the word that you've chosen as type, because I've made a full career around talking around type. In the context of preferences. So I'm a training consultant. I work with various corporations, in fact, a lot of corporations. I used to travel a lot before this time. And I deliver interpersonal skills training and connect people with people. So anything that's about communication or understanding self and others, adapting and connecting. And that's why I'm so excited by the word type.
Right. Well, that's great. So, how does the word type land for you in all these years, right?
Yeah. So it's a good and a bad connection, in that when I say the word type in my work, then a lot of times people will say, "Oh, you're about to pigeonhole me or put me in a box."
Right.
You're going to say you're this type or that type. But you're not this type or that type, and so people are obviously, and rightly so, uncomfortable with that. But it does give us a language to be able to understand one another, how we move through the world, what energy we're engaging in at any one point.
Right.
And so I love working with type. I love working with archetypes. I like working with the language that we put around our preferences, which we usually call types.
Right. It's very interesting because I have, I guess, similar language of labels, right? So I talk a lot about labels and living beyond our labels and working beyond our labels. And so my, I guess, stance is that, labels aren't good or bad, but it is how we make them, what we make them mean, right? What we reduce them to. That beyond that is who we are. So when type shows up for me, I don't want to say I get triggered, but there is um, this pigeonholed, or this feeling that I'm being reduced to something.
Yeah.
I really enjoy, personality assessments and all of those things. Um, and sometimes they kind of put me in a box. I consider myself, Myers-Briggs, introvert. For a long time when I was working in a corporate environment, I was an INTJ. And it's interesting because when I was working for myself, I moved. I was more, I think it was an IEFP. There was like an FP in there. I was like, where's that FP come from? Right. So now I'm feeling, and I have perceptions and all that other kind of stuff. So I recognize that there's a type, but there's also movement in that.
Yes. Yeah, there absolutely is. There absolutely is. And I think, when we practice understanding ourselves and understanding others, then we might tap into some of those energies that we weren't tapping into before. So, for example, if you went from being a T to a P, so thinking, which is more detached and logical, versus F, which is feeling, then it might be because you're tapping into that, because you've created an awareness around that and an understanding around that. And we all have all of those energies in us. We might prefer an introversion or extroversion, but we have times when we use either, which is where typing people can be, somewhat dangerous, because, you're never always an introvert. That's not true.
Right.
There are places and times when you show up. However, your criteria for using extroverted behavior might be different to mine.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of funny. When I tell people that, my type, that I'm, an introvert, they're like, that's not true, right? It's like I say, you're on Facebook Live like daily, so you can't possibly be, right? So it's those type of things, and it is, for me, where I have gotten in trouble, right, or where I have had difficulty, is how much I believe the type, right? How much I feel that I have to show up as that type. And that's where it is like, I feel this way, but I don't feel this way. So, but how am I going to show up? Yeah. So then that's the struggle.
So the letters, or if you take one of the profiling tools, and there are lots of free ones online, if you search Carl Jung tools, they're there. But I always have a caveat of, just use that as a language to understand yourself. So, for example, I am truly an extrovert in all parts of my life, all the time. I am an extrovert, which means I think out loud. My communication pace is louder, volume-wise. I tend to be faster paced. I tend to speak in more generalizations rather than details. And so, but for you to show up as an extrovert, then there might be, and I'm just, I'm not saying this is you, but there might be some criteria around, you need to feel comfortable in your surroundings. You need to feel like you trust those surroundings and those people that you're communicating with.
Right.
And you need to feel like, it's respectful, or, mutual in some way, or there could be all kinds of criteria. And when those criteria are satisfied, then you will speak more readily, if you like. And that's the difference. So when I work in the corporate environment, people will very often say, I'm the most talkative person on my team. How come this tool is saying I'm an introvert? And I'm saying, okay, but if I picked you up and moved you somewhere else where you knew no one, in a brand new surrounding, would you still display that extroverted energy? Well, no. I'd have to get comfortable and have to find out who's there and get to know them and build trust. I don't have that. So for me to use extroverted energy is just an automatic go-to.
Wow.
I have to do the exact opposite to slow down and listen.
Right.
So, for example, when I'm coaching, because I'm a business coach, I would have to slow down and really tune into that more introverted energy that I have, but I don't prefer.
Right. Yeah. So here is how my challenge with extroversion is, like I said, even though I show up, right, and that's what the challenge is. Show, right, here it,
Mhm.
and here is the connection to that. I was in the theater, in the performing arts,
Mhm.
and so outside of the performing arts, I barely talk to people.
Mhm.
And so it started in high school, and so I started being on stage, and people were like, "Whoa, who is this person on stage? You have all this um, life and all this other kind of stuff. Outside of that, there is not." And so I feel like the only way that I can quote unquote show up is in a performance setting.
Ah,
And it gets very dicey very quickly, right? For me, that it's like, like you were saying, is this a safe place? Is this, are these my words? Am I, am all of these, am I putting on the show, or am I just being present in this
yeah.
moment right here? And so it is, my preference is to just, be in the room, right? And just kind of observe what's going on. And just kind of, if someone asks me a question, I'll respond, right?
Yeah.
But other than that, um, I don't have, I want to say, the desire to kind of, own the room, or anything like that. And it's like there are so many times in my entrepreneurial journey that coaches would say, you got to be out there, you got to do this, you got to show up, and this is the way you have to show up. And it's like, dude, how can I show up as myself and show up as this quote unquote successful entrepreneur? And it was just batting. I was going to say I was going to bat shit crazy, but I mean, it just feel like, oh, what type am I, right? What am I,
Yeah.
and how I can fit that in, and like I said, it gets very dicey very quickly for me.
Yeah, so I think for me, it's about being authentic,
Hmm.
um, but also being aware.
Right.
So there's a rule in communication, which is how can you know what you've communicated until you know what I've understood?
Hmm. Yeah.
So there has to be some room for adapting how you're communicating in
Right.
order to connect with the people that you're connecting with. And we all have preferences of whether we prefer introversion or extroversion, whether we prefer to base our decisions on data and fact, or whether we prefer to base them on our feelings and
Right.
intuition even. Um, and so if you just looked at those two criteria, then which am I using? Which is helpful in this situation? So when I'm running a big conference, extroversion is absolutely the energy I want to be channeling because I need to
Right.
be getting people involved. However, if we're in an environment where you want to sit quietly and you will chat, if uh, my need is for everyone to be included. So
Hmm.
people will then put layers on it. Oh, she's looking to be the center of attention, or she's,
Right. Hmm.
and actually that's not the case. It's just that my need is for everybody to be having fun, and that's how I go about it. And if
Right.
I don't have that awareness of this isn't fun for everybody, like not everybody wants or needs to be included.
Right.
They get to watch or listen or
Right.
observe or reflect. That's that. If I don't have that awareness of that, if I can't
Right.
adjust,
Right.
then I'm going to actually do the opposite of including people because I'm going to make people be put off, or I'm going to make them, by some sort of authority. I can probably make them do it during the workday, the learning then won't happen, which is my intention, or
Right.
the connection with the material, or the connection with the people in the room won't happen.
Right.
So we have our preferences, and they're useful to know about what they are,
Right.
but it's also useful to know because we're as much defined by what we don't prefer as by
Right.
what we do prefer, right?
Right. Absolutely. It's
So
Yeah.
it's
Go ahead.
important.
Yeah. I totally get that. We make so many assumptions, not just within our language, but what people are doing and not doing. And I can tell you, if I'm in the room, I'm included. I don't need to be talking. I don't need to be doing all that other kind of stuff. So don't try to drag me into your foolishness, right? Right? You know,
Exactly.
and
Exactly.
and
And
so
then
how
it's whiny dragging you in.
right? It's right. It's just crazy. It's like, no, I'm good. It's like, no, I really want you to be. It's like, no, seriously, right? You know,
Yeah.
there is I recently did, because I there's two questions that's coming up for you, and one, it's reminded me of, I recently did a survey on self-awareness. I would just,
Yeah.
ask some people in my community what self-awareness meant to them. And one of the questions was, who kn- who knows you more, or something like kind of crazy like that. Who do you think has a better understanding of you? And it was like three. Well, I think there was like four, because there was another, right?
Mhm.
I just threw that in there. But one was yourself, right?
Mhm.
Your friends and family, people around you, are assessment tools. And about 10% said assessment tools. And I was like surprised that it was that high, that people would leave their understanding of themselves to those tools versus other things. And I don't know if that's, if I asked the question wrong or anything like that, or has that shown up for you a lot, that people are like, hey, good, I am this, so now I will show up as this. They need that tool to tell them who they are, and that's just what it is.
So, how we know ourselves sometimes doesn't take into account, how others are responding, which gives us feedback, right? That feedback. If you're with people who are saying, encouraging that behavior, that's feedback. If you're with people who are discouraging it, that's feedback. So,
Right.
so if we but we still don't know why they said those things.
Hmm.
We still don't know why they gave us that feedback, and doesn't even have to be verbal. We still don't, because that's coming from them,
Right.
right? So we know our intentions, but we don't always know how we're coming across.
Right.
I have no idea who's listening or how that's coming across to them.
Right.
So then you could argue, well, then I know myself better because I know what I'm trying to say.
Right.
But then other people will have their version of you, and they'll put it through their own filters, through their own preferences and experience and so on.
Right.
And so they don't really ever know you. They only know you through, even my own mother didn't know me, in the same way. She puts it through her own judgments and her own intentions and,
Right.
my past patterns when I was 5 and so on. Some of which are still consistent, but anyway.
Right. I got some of those too.
But so it, in a way, doesn't surprise me that some people will say an assessment tool, because that is objective, right? That's an algorithm based on how you've answered questions. And those questions, depending on what the tools are, they'll ask similar or the same questions over and over, because they compare themselves to themselves and themselves to previous.
Right.
And so I'm not saying that they have more validity. I'm just saying they don't go through all those filters and judgments. So they're an objective external thing that people are not capable of.
Right.
Because even if you had a therapist, they're still putting it through their skills and experience, right?
Wow. So so my shock that it was 10%, is that a low number, or is that a high number?
It depends on who you're asking, your audience, and what their experience of those things are, and what their judgments of those things
there was
are.
85, well, gender breakdown. Okay. There was 85% female. And it was 25%. It was really divided in a third that were like over 50, in their 40s or 30s. So that was like 75% was in 30 to 50. range. So, you know, so yeah, so that's kind of the demographic that was there. Um, I think for me, one of my core values is independence.
Mhm.
I embrace the, there's no one newer than you type of thing. It's like, yes, you're right, but sometimes it's like, oh crap, there's no one new me. It's like, right? Right? It's, type
Yeah.
of thing. It's like the good news and bad news. You're unique, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I hear that.
The, but then I hear this thing that there's, you hear these studies, there's only 4 types of people in the world. That's it, right? Or there's 2 types of people, right? Or there's things that people say that kind of messes with people, right? It keeps them from being their unique self because of type, because of the categories that our mind or our brain, it's not our mind, our brain needs to kind of like function. So how can we acknowledge type and ignore type, so, at the same
Yeah.
time?
Yeah, so I think we use type as a basis and as a kind of a language, but even language is very fallible. So, how something shows up. Let's say that there's an aggressive type, for argument's sake.
Right.
How that shows itself is so different. So there would have to be, if you're going to have 4 types of people, you're going to have a whole bunch of subcategories.
Right.
But also, I would then question, what's your secondary preference?
Right.
Because if my preference is introverted thinking, so I like to think inside my head, I like to detach and look at details of data.
Right.
And my secondary preference is I then like to extroverted thinking. I like to speak up and say what I want to say very directly.
Right.
That's a very different energy to the introverted thinker whose secondary preference is introverted feeling and referring to their values.
Right. Mm.
So you can't just have 4 types, and because if there are 4 types, what's the order of them? I mean, right away there, it's
Right.
split off, right?
Right.
How strong are those? Is my first preference an extremely strong, as mine is, or is it kind of minor and my secondary is close to it?
Right. Mm.
So it breaks down and down and down and down, and you end up with hundreds and hundreds of all these kind of subcategories of how they show up.
Right.
And then that doesn't take into account the fact that our experiences and our filters can change over time. I mean, they do change, right?
Right.
So then that brings out other energies that we might not have used so much or needed to use so much. So I find this all the time in teams where, I'll use an example of myself. When I work with other practitioners who use profiling tools and things, and we get together and do professional development days and things, I'm very quiet. Now, I'm normally the loudest person in any room, but I'm very quiet because I find that energy exhausting. And there are so many extroverts in the room, it just becomes ridiculous, and there's just too much noise. So I get quieter. Some people in that same environment get louder.
Wow.
So responses, I mean, there's just so many, you just could never say there's 4 types of people.
Right.
But what we do is we use language that informs and helps us understand how to use that language and what that really means. So if I'm working with people, I'll always say, okay, so let's say aggressive type, the example I used earlier, then I would say, what does that mean for you?
Right.
Is that being quiet and silent treatment? Because that's aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
Is that being sarcastic, or is that being really in your face and like physical or volume?
Right.
So it shows itself. So we don't even have the same understanding, and to think you understand what somebody else's words mean is a pure hallucination.
Right.
Right.
Right. And that's how, but we communicate that way all the time, as if,
And that's why we think other people get us. And that's because they have patterns, because they've known us for a little while, and they have patterns of how that stacks up and then what our intention is.
Right. Right.
And that's why some people in your survey will have said, well, other people know me better.
Right. Right. That I think, I'm trying to think, the largest was other people. I'm trying to recall that, but like I said, I got distracted because the tools got, 10%, right? So I was like, what?
Yeah.
But
But it depends who you're asking. If you're asking people who've come from a business background where they've had that, or they've come from a psychology background, or they've come from some sort of, I don't know, counseling or therapy, or interpersonal, even coaching, they
right,
would probably be more familiar with those tools, and that might. But if you asked it in another environment where they've never experienced it or
right,
don't believe it,
right.
then that would be different. So it's very skewed.
Right. It is. And that's, like I said, when I put it in, I was like, that was interesting because there, I was going to say there's a lot of people that I've connected to recently that use a lot of tools.
Yeah.
They use, guidance cards, they use tarot cards, they use oracle cards, and assessment tools, the what's it called, the zodiac, stuff, all of those things, and it's just like, geez, right? It's like, because it's like someone shows up and says something, and it's like, oh, they're being a Libra right now. It's like, okay, what, it's like,
Yes.
how do you know what that means? All that other kind of stuff. So I'm just really trying to understand that, like I said, it's important and it makes a difference. And I totally understand. And I believe in that science, and I get it. But if I hold too closely to it,
Yes.
then it's no of use. Then that uses me, right?
Then that
And
puts you in a type, or
right,
puts you in some sort of category.
right. And then I stop being myself.
Yeah. Yeah. So I use tools to inform. I mean, if you're talking about oracle cards or tarot cards, and I'm absolutely not an expert. I do enjoy them, but my interpretation, going through my own filters and going through my own knowledge and aspirations and experiences and that would be quite different to how you might interpret the same text. I mean, even if we read the same text about what that reading was about, or that card, we would read it quite differently.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So how we choose to internalize things, and that I use tools that inform us, so that you can create an understanding of yourself, and then you can understand your lesser preferences that somebody else might have as their strongest preference.
Right.
And then what do I need to do in my approach to connect with them, to make sure that each of our meaning is understood, and that my definition is assertive, right?
Right. Absolutely. There is, I don't know if you know of Jonathan Fields. He has a new, well, it's been a couple years now, an assessment tool. I think it's called Sparketype.
Oh, okay.
And there's two reasons why I find it interesting, because I took the assessment. It's a free assessment online. It's at thegoodlifeproject.com. I think that's what it is. You can go there. But my Sparketype, and so basically what sparks you, right? What causes you to be in your doing, right? It's interesting to me because my conversation is like in the be, do, have. I'm in the B category, recognizing who you be, right? I'm within that conversation. The Sparketype thing is basically you being in your doing, right? The doing of your being, all that other kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So within that Sparketype, I don't know all of them, but I know that I am a maven sage. Oh. My shadow is a sage. So my spark is a maven, makes total sense. And the sage. And it's like, okay. And when I was talking to him, last year, and he says, oh, I totally get your show now. It's like, you are showing up as a maven sage. And it's like, I am learning and I'm sharing what I'm learning.
Yeah.
In 40 minutes or less, right?
Yeah, and you know what? You'll learn the lessons more. I mean, I always say to people, as soon as you learn something, go teach somebody else, because that's how you're going to learn it.
Right. And so that's why I have these conversations in front of people, right? Right.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. So
And so,
I do the opposite though.
uh,
So because I'm naturally talking, and I would do these conversations all the time, like I just would. But
right.
I think I do the opposite, where I have to find ways to not be talking and
Hmm.
communicating
Right.
and listening.
Right. It's kind of, I talk more, on my show than I ever do in my coaching, right? So because it's more about listening and
Yeah.
that type of thing. A lot of even when some of the clients want me to tell them what to do. Really? Is that what you want? You're not going to do it anyway. You barely do the homework that I asked you to do. Right? So you don't want me to tell you what to do, right? It's like, so it's like, and that's something that you say you want to do, right? It's
Yeah. What
so
you want is for me to validate what you want. Yeah.
right. So it's I don't know if that was coaching secrets or anything like that, but that's that's how it comes out. It's like, dude, right? You're
Yeah.
paying me a lot of money to not do the things that you say you want to do. So, but no, I digress. But but you see the transformation. You see, we see people once they kind of let those types or how they feel that they need to show up. And I think that's the conversation around the labels, because there is, I'll bring out one of my labels. I have a nice guy label, right? Um, and I really want to show up as the nice guy,
Mhm.
period. So I'm always looking to, okay, I want to be seen as the nice guy. And recognizing that the more that I became aware that the nice guy is great, right? But the nice guy isn't needed all the time.
Mhm.
And there are sometimes the nice guy is causing trouble, because, there's a lot of nonsense that is happening that the nice guy will allow to happen because he's more committed to being nice than really making a difference here.
Yeah.
And the more that I embrace that and say, you know what? The nice guy is not needed right now. I don't need to show up as a jerk because it's not, the extreme,
Yeah.
but whoever needs to show up in this moment right now, is available to do that. And I think sometimes, as I said before, I am so committed, and I've said on the show, before, that I have an unhealthy relationship with consistency. And it's like, sometimes it's like, okay, this is who I think I am, and this is who I'm going to be, hell or high water, type of
Yeah.
thing. And it's just
Yeah.
like, dude, stop it. It ain't working, right?
Yeah. So why
And
keep doing it? Yeah. Yeah.
right. And it's like, that's when we hold on to those types in our lives. There's a language that has been coming out. I've this word that I've been hearing a lot more. I don't know if it's in the coaching space, but I've just heard it a lot more. It's called shadow. Your shadow work.
Mhm.
Is that a nice way of saying that some things that you don't like, right?
Yeah.
Right. And
Well,
it's
things well, it's not necessarily the things we don't prefer, but often that's part of our shadow. So if you wanted to look at shadow, there's some fairly complex text, but is a lot online that Carl Jung's work is based on, which is where most people are talking about shadow work. And Jung talked about the part of us that isn't in the light. So if you think about a shadow where the sun is shining on you, and that's what gets the light and the warmth. What
right,
doesn't is the stuff behind you. And we very
right,
often, we don't really barely even see our shadow. We might glance
right,
back once in a while.
right,
Sometimes we're standing on a different angle and our shadow is kind of right there.
right,
But it's that side of us that we don't look at or don't prefer to look at.
right,
And it's there's a lot of ways to do shadow work, but it is a great piece of work to do, to look at those things that we don't
right.
prefer to look at. because it's uncomfortable. Like
Right.
it's bias in our shadow.
Right.
And as we get older, a lot of us start to do that shadow work just kind of naturally, and we start to
Right.
embrace some of those behaviors. It's also very often what we don't like in others. So when
Mm.
we see somebody, we take an instant, not necessarily even dislike, but we're less comfortable with
Right.
somebody. It can be that's a mirror to
Right.
the side of us that we don't prefer.
Right. It's kind of, I think so. I thank you for helping me with that, because for me, there's a part of how shadow work was showing up for me was that what was missing, right? What I felt was lacking going in. And it's like, there's so many times that I embrace a comment of, I'm whole and complete, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I am not aware of my completeness. I'm not missing anything, but I'm just not aware
Mm-hmm.
of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
And it's I don't sometimes I get in this space of, if I'm this type, right, I'm not this, right? I'm so, because I'm in this category, I'm not that. And it's like either or.
Oh no, we're all of them.
Right. And that's that and. So really embracing the and. But it's so I guess I don't want to say it's easy for me, or I don't know if it's easy for others, but it's easy for me to kind of feel like I am this type of person. I show up this type of way. So because I'm this, I am not anything else, and I cannot be this, right? And that is no longer, it's like I've picked a side, right? And these are my cards, and this is what I have to deal with, instead of embracing that these are the cards that are currently showing.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And there's a lot more cards available.
Yeah, that's one of the many reasons why we need to be very careful about judging others in their positions, because we can find ourselves in those positions and then go, yeah, but it's different for me. It's like,
right.
Wait, yeah. Yeah, it's just, this is when I talk a lot about energies, and this is the energy I'm using. This is the energy I prefer to use. This is the energy that most often shows up, but I do engage in all of the others at different times in different contexts. And if I don't have an awareness of when I need to be using it to connect with others, because that's usually my intention, then what am I doing? We have to be able to connect with other people.
Right. Yeah.
And whether we want to or not, I mean, there's a lot of people right now loving. I mean, I'm in the UK right now, but so we're in lockdown right now. There's a lot of people loving that, saying, "I hope we never go back to the office." Right. And they're dreading the time when they need to go back to the office. But actually, we do need to connect with people. We just maybe not all the time, but we do need, unless you live on some sort of remote island where you're just alone.
Right. And there is, I had a conversation earlier this week, and the word was emergency. And within that conversation, I don't know how hugging came up, right? It's like it just kind of showed up in the conversation.
Cool.
And I mentioned that, outside of my wife, I haven't really hugged anyone else in like over a year, right? Almost a year, right? Type of thing. And I didn't consider myself a hugger, but I felt like I'm like missing hugging, right? Type of thing.
Yeah.
And my guess was like, yeah, I am a hugger, and it's getting kind of dicey for me, right? It's like really tough, for her. And it's like, I was like, are you just going to like kind of like start hugging people? It's like, I'm just like, reckless abandon, just kind of just hug people or anything like that. But you just don't know. I mean, we need each other.
Yes.
And I think we will figure out, it's interesting that the conversation around technology before the pandemic was, in many cases, that technology was keeping us from each other, right? It was it was disconnecting us.
Mhm.
But
Or
I can,
toxic. It was
are
connected.
toxic, right?
Mhm.
And I couldn't imagine dealing with the pandemic and dealing with this without technology.
Yeah.
It would really, there would be a lot of other things that would be showing up in our society if we didn't have Zoom or, the internet, all the, so, it's like I said, it's just fascinating.
Yeah, I didn't live online at all before the pandemic. I mean, I had social media accounts that I used for some of my hobbies and things, or connecting with people involved in the same sort of things. But I really didn't live online, and now we have a whole online business, which is
Right.
just crazy. You know,
Right.
yeah,
So,
yeah, it's changed. It's changed a lot.
yeah. So you have now turned into one of those types of people, right?
I, I haven't and haven't. So it's interesting because when this is over, like going so in my new business, we talk about personal life, work life, and stage life,
Hmm.
and where our confidence is strongest and where we aspire to build more confidence. And when I go back to the corporate kind of training environment, my personal life doesn't come into it at all because
Hmm.
that's not part of the story.
Right.
Um, and my stage life certainly doesn't come back into it. My stage life in this case is being online, and this is a stage.
Right.
So that doesn't really come into it either, other than I do webinars and Zoom coaching and things. But those two lives are kind of cut off, and then I'm just again living in my work life
Right. Wow.
for a
Hmm.
lot of the day.
Right.
So
There.
that'd be strange.
Yeah. There were moments. I was remote. Before the pandemic, but I realized um, there was this feeling that I needed to kind of do more because now I was home more. Right. I needed to be doing more work, and so I felt like I was working longer because I thought I had a good balance of work and when I was off and everything like that. And then that I just threw that out of the window for some reason. It just felt like, hey, I'm at home. I need to be quote unquote working. I need to be doing that type of thing. So those work hours um, increased, but it's I don't know. It's just very interesting for me how that really shifted. I
Yeah,
think.
and I think a lot of people need to do, some boundaries work there, because I'm very often working late at night, which I prefer, because then I can have my mornings off to do my thing, and then I can work later in the evenings. I can work weekends and have an afternoon off if I want to. I have a lot more flexibility to do the things because it's an online life.
Right.
There's always somebody up somewhere.
Right.
Um,
Somewhere. Right.
yeah. So, but and I can be, doing something on a web page in the middle of the night. It doesn't matter when I do it to anybody else.
Right.
Um, but I think there's, for a lot of people, those boundaries are blurred, and they've just ended up kind of going into, now I just work all the time, or and I work in the same space that I eat and I live, and
Right.
so there's going to need to be some reestablishment, particularly if it goes on long term for people working at home. I've worked at home because I've had a training consultancy for 25 years, so
Hmm.
I've always had a home office anyway.
Hmm.
Um, which my son has taken over because he has a full-time job and he's working from home. So that
Right.
that was an intention. But so I don't have an office anymore. I now work out of my living room because my
Right.
office is occupied. But I think,
Right.
for a lot of people, they don't have that space to go into another room to work and then come out of
Right.
that at the end of the day, and that's
Right.
their work done. And so they're working in the same space that they're living in, and that there's going to need to be some work done around boundaries.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I think we can talk about this for hours.
Yes.
However, your day is I don't know if it's ending or not, because there's somebody, even though it's Friday, there's still people up and doing stuff, right?
Nowhere near ending. It's
Right.
5 in the evening, and I'm nowhere near ending. Yeah, but I
Um,
had to still start in the morning. See, that's the beauty of online life.
right. Is there anything that's come up in this conversation that you want to leave everyone with?
Well, I want to come back to, I guess, the type, and just um, because my whole everything is about self awareness, and
Mm.
you know, use tools to help yourself understand yourself, from what you prefer and what you don't prefer, and
Right.
then use compassion for other people who use what you don't prefer. Try and understand them. You know, try and say, well, how does that work for you? What's that like? What is it? Why don't you need to be, you know,
Right.
up the life and soul of the party up on the table with everybody else? Do you know what? Tell me what
Right.
that's like, and really with non-judgmentally, you know. And I think you'll get so much richness about understanding others and what makes them tick. It's such a cool way of just communicating and being understood.
Yeah.
So
No,
so key.
I definitely appreciate that. I mean, there is more freedom in that than anything else
Yeah,
that we, kind of trying to confine ourselves to.
completely.
Thank you very much. This
My
is,
pleasure.
it's sometimes it feels like I run out of words because it's like, or or sometimes there is this acknowledgement that I have a series of lovely conversations,
Yeah.
and I am okay with saying this was a lovely conversation, and
Oh, yeah.
but thank you very much, Heather.
Oh,
This
it's
has
a
been great.
pleasure. Absolute pleasure. Absolute
Okay.
pleasure. Yeah.
Okay. Hopefully, we'll be able to say our goodbyes in the green room.
Okay.
Okay. Well, what's your type, right? I think what I got out of this conversation for myself is that, like labels are important, but you are more important. Types are important because they kind of give us, it's like boundaries and no boundaries, right? Limits and no limits. It our brain needs, it's not, I guess, compartmentalized, right? We can kind of see what we're looking at. But when we really embrace that we are more than our labels, more than just our type, and that we have, all of the types are available to us, then we can show up fully. I hope this conversation has brought value not just to your day, but to your life. I invite you to reach out to me at iamwilliambrown.com, where you can get a complimentary coaching session so I can help you be yourself and live your life. Because the world wants you, the world needs you, but the world isn't waiting for you. So go be you. Have a great rest of the day, and I'll see you tomorrow on One Word Conversation.